Welcome to Greenhouse Grower to Grower, the podcast where we're shaping the future of floriculture one conversation at a time. We talk with the growers, leaders, and innovators shaping tomorrow's greenhouse industry today. From market trends, next generation plants, and innovative production, to the challenges and breakthroughs redefining what it means to grow. I'm Brian Sparks, editor of Greenhouse Grower. Let's dig into what's next together.
The floriculture industry never stops innovating, and that includes growers as well as industry suppliers. This episode is the fourth and final part of our Leaders in Floriculture podcast series, where we talk to experts in the green industry community about the important roles they play in innovation, sustainability, and helping to shape the future of floriculture. In this episode, I talked to AmericanHort President and CEO Ken Fisher, Vice President of Advocacy and Government Affairs Mika, and Vice President of Marketing and Member Engagement, Beth Cowardin, about AmericanHort's vision for the future of the green industry, how it's changing the way it communicates with and educates its members, and how AmericanHort is helping to build the next generation of industry leaders. Here's our conversation.
I want to start out just taking a step back and just looking at AmericanHort's overall vision for the future, and in particular, how AmericanHort's vision kind of reflects, where the industry is headed, how AmericanHort is helping to kind of shape the future growth of this industry as we move forward.
Brian, I think as we talk as a staff and a board, the green industry is at a very important inflection point. Demand for plants, I think demand for all the outdoor living remains strong, but the operating environment has changed fundamentally. I mean, we're no longer in a period where you just grow good plants and you're guaranteed success. Today, as we look at this, winning requires business discipline. There's channel strategy, there's labor management, there's brand positioning. There's a level of operational sophistication that's kind of changing every year. At AmericanHort, our vision has sort of evolved accordingly. We still unite, we still advocate for the industry. That's in our vision and our mission. But increasingly, our role, I think, is to help raise the performance bar for our member companies and really across the industry. And that means helping businesses, I think, more strategically about margin protection, about succession planning, about workforce development, about capital allocation. It means bringing them in to help navigate that regulatory complexity that Matt does so well, more proactively than less reactively. And then, of course, we're seeing this significant generational transferring. Many businesses are moving from second, third. We got some fourth. I think we even have some fifth generation, but others are being acquired by outside parties or they're merging, and that changes the expectations around things like governance and reporting. And we believe that the future belongs to companies that can combine strong horticulture expertise, but also strong leadership capability. So I think our role is clear. Ensure the green industry doesn't just respond to change, but we're developing leaders who can lead it.
Yeah, well, and I think too, the way that AmericanHort responds to that is always impressive, because I know, just for as an example, this week I saw a couple of emails come through about a focus on financial literacy. So kind of speaking to, you see how the needs of the industry are changing, particularly, Ken, as you talk about that in some cases the next generation coming in and the needs that they have, being able to take that and then respond as an organization to, how you're going to provide that information to some of these individuals, I think is really impressive.
Brian, we've seen trends over the past several years. We meet with our connectors in the fall. We meet with our board multiple times a year. And we've moved from not just education and certification, but financial literacy. We want our employees to know more about a balance sheet and a P&L and cash flow so that they can participate greater in the management of this business. It's very encouraging.
Okay. Matt, I know I want to get your perspective here on, as we talk to a lot of growers and they'll say, there's things that I can control that when it comes to the future of my business, there's things that I feel like I can't control. And I know, one of the first things they say is, like what happens on Capitol Hill, for example. I don't have control over some of that, but I know you do so much work on the advocacy side. And, that again has changed how growers approach, working with some of their lawmakers. How do you see that continuing to evolve?
Yeah, Brian, I think you hear this and we hear this. The two things our folks can't control, especially in the grower side, is the weather and the government. So, how do you get engaged there? The biggest thing we always say is if you're not telling your story, somebody else is. And that other person or individual may be trying to take away your business or your facility or, your product.
Mm,
I've been here almost 3 years now. One of the things we've really done a good job with, working with others, like American Farm Bureau and IFPA, is like all of our members have the same problem. So, how do we multiply and magnify that conversation so that people on Capitol Hill, because we talk about this all the time. Less than 2% of the American public is involved in ag, and even
yeah,
less are involved in horticulture. So we and our members have to be telling that story, and they have to come up to DC. They have to go to their state capital. And then, more importantly, invite those elected officials and staff out to these facilities, because once they see how nice these are, what's going on, that these are family run businesses, that these are small mom and pops, that these are folks that, you see these flowers and shrubs and trees and Christmas trees at the store or your local garden center. They
yeah,
start to understand the supply chain. And Brian, I think that's the biggest thing that we've really tried to explain is from the grower, from the farm, all the way to when that customer may buy it, wherever they may buy it. We have to explain that full supply chain. And if
okay.
their elected officials and staff don't understand that, we got to start over. And it's not just about one segment; it's about the whole industry, all the way to the end, to the customer and consumer.
Sure, sure, absolutely. When you talk about, again, the next generation coming into the industry, I would imagine, the way that they look for and receive information changes as well. And that kind of speaks to a lot of the digital activities American Hort is doing, or, I mean, it's not just the in-person events and, something like Cultivate and Impact Washington and the Plug and Cunning Conference. I mean, those are all great chances to network with each other, but more and more there's other tools available for that to kind of keep that, those discussions going throughout the year. Um, can one of you talk about how that continues to evolve at American Heart?
Sure, Brian. I'll respond to that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the information age that we're in, or past, some would say, is changing all the time. I mean, and people's attention spans just keep kind of getting shorter and shorter because there's so much information being put out there. So we try hard to reach our members in the industry through all the channels available to us. On
Mhm,
website, social media, emails. I know we send a lot of emails, but it's important to try to reach people where they are with the information that we need, and we're trying to do a better job of personalizing that information and asking members to tell us, what do you care about most? Which pieces of our services that we offer are you most interested in, so that we're making sure that they are getting all of that information.
mhm,
One of the tools we've recently added, as you may recall, is our AI bot called Sage,
yeah,
that resides on our website, and that's a tool to help find the information that people are looking for more easily. But it's also an AI tool, just like other AI tools out there in the marketplace. And we're working now with the vendor that we use to bring that to market, to find other strategic ways that it can be a resource for our members in the industry, particularly as we look at workforce needs.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, you're right. There, the communication landscape is changing all the time, and we try to stay, up and be as relevant on that as we possibly can.
It's funny that you bring up AI because I was gonna ask about that at some point. You might as well I'll talk about it now, and it's not just, how what I was gonna ask was kind of a twofold question, how American Hort is using and developing AI tools, and you just spoke to to a great one there. But then also, when you look across the industry, that's one of the big lingering questions we hear about so many times is, you know, AI is such a high level concept. How do I, focus it on how it can best address my own business needs as I build for the future? What kind of trends are you seeing as an organization, in terms of how that's going to affect the industry, and how are you working with your members to kind of navigate through some of those challenges?
Sure. I mean, I think we're all learning, right? It's so new, and everybody's kind of at a different place in terms of their comfort level using AI and their knowledge of AI. But I know talked to a lot of folks earlier this year, and people are figuring it out. Some companies have AI committees and they're looking at it very, very closely. Some
Mhm.
companies have many tools in place and others aren't using it at all. So, I think we have the opportunity at American Hort to help teach and train people on some of the, if you will, low hanging fruit and easy ways to use
Yeah.
some of these resources. And like I said, we look forward to expanding on it and offering more, robust uses. An example we shared at a meeting this past fall was for like the landscape sector. What
Yeah.
if you could put in all of your customers that you need to service in the next week or the next month, and you could input, here are the services they need, and here's their address, and here's how long it takes, and it provides you your schedule for your
Yeah.
crew. Like, that's just, one example. We literally have pages from brainstorming of different ideas, and we're working through vetting those ideas and seeing, what might be possible and what might be of value to the industry and to our members.
Yeah, well, and to your point too there, I mean, the conversation is gonna be different, obviously, at any company organization. I know,
Mhm.
just as an example, so at Cultivate this past year, I sat in on one of the panel discussions on AI. In fact, I think it was a return panel from the previous year, and one of the panelists was talking about, he's really gotten into really into the weeds on how AI can work, and he actually started what he called an AI club at his operation, where, they get together. I think it was the first Thursday of each month, and it's somebody who's either using AI or wants to use, and they talk about, okay, what can we do?
Right.
If I'm just want to get started with it, or if I'm into it already and I really want to see where it can go from here. So that's an example, I think, what you're talking about.
Mhm.
I think we might currently at American Hort, we might be a step upstream.
Yeah.
We have a lot of focus on data, business intelligence, and how we help people make better decisions, of which AI is one of those tools we're all trying to figure out where that fits.
Yeah.
We for the past few years have been trying to work on, benchmarking, whether it's financial benchmarking or salary benchmarking, or how do we get data in people's hands? How do we start to help people understand sort of margin dashboards, and how do we look at like we have a project underway right now where we're trying to wrap our arms around some purchased third party data and use AI to cut data in a way that might help our industry with production planning or demand planning or inventory planning or custom
Yeah.
service. We're not sure how it's going to help, but it's sort of in that experimental place about if we have the data and if we have an AI tool, what can we do with it? So
Yeah.
what we'd like to do is sort of help the industry evolve with this. AI is a tool. What we want to get out of it is better decision making for our businesses.
Yeah, I think your point there is great, King. Because I mean, there's so many tools out there now that can help that other girl can use to collect that data, and that's all well and good. But it's how you then use that data to make informed decisions that I think is the next step that this industry really needs to tackle. And I think whether it's you know something is, I'll say, simple, but as simple as a webinar type presentation that American Art compiles, for example, where you have speakers can talk about this, and that's a great example of talking to the industry about again, making data-driven decisions that can drive the future of your organization.
Yeah, and we've been our industry is really good at this, and we're fortunate that American Hort gets to be one of those keepers of kind of peer to peer best practices. And
Mhm.
we do industry tours, and people sort of open up their nursery, their greenhouse, and show people how they do things. And I think it'll be the same thing with AI, as people, as Mary Beth said about just planning for landscape fruit. I think we'll see more of that as people sort of hit things that work with AI. I think
Yeah.
we'll be figure those out, and that'd be very helpful.
Okay. Can
Well,
I?
and I want
Yeah, please.
oh, sorry, I want to go back to one other thing on AI. What's interesting about Stage and other AI tools is
Yeah.
it also it works in multiple languages. So going back to your communication question, want to also share with everybody that we are putting more of our education out there translated into Spanish,
Sure.
which we know is really important for the industry. But you'll see more resources like that. And again, just a reminder that Spanish speakers or French speakers or whatever language someone else might be their native tongue, AI might be a tool to help with that communication and bridging those gaps.
Well, and to your point there, and I mean, we've seen Spanish language tools out there for a while, but they tend to be focused, or they had been focused strictly on, you're in the greenhouse and it's more plant production based. Now I think that through some of the tools that your team's putting together, it's, you might have a full team or crew that's being managed and, with only Spanish speaking individuals. So, it's not just about the production side, it's about the management side as well. So and
Right.
again, you've seen the way that you guys are working on that.
Yeah, and Brian, one other thing with messaging we're seeing, especially with this USDA and this White House, this administration loves social media. So it's not just sending a press release anymore or
Right.
an email out. It's getting on whatever channel they're on and getting it there, or getting them a quote through social media, which goes into your, earlier question about messaging and everything. So it's not the old way of just walking to a meeting or dropping off a press release. There are
Sure.
so many avenues now, as Mary Beth mentioned, of like how we get information out, how we educate our members, and more importantly, how we educate the public at large and our elected officials at the same time.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. I want to jump back real quick to a point that Ken, you made at the very beginning of the conversation. You alluded briefly to consolidation. I think that's something we're starting to see a lot more in this industry, whether it's on the grower level, or it's at the supplier level. We saw the news recently on, Atlas Manufacturing and Stuppy recently coming together, and it's certainly on the grower side as well. We see it on our top 100 list they put together every year. How is that something? How does American Hort look at that and kind of help the industry work through, what happens when there is consolidation taking place?
Yeah, I think we're um as it relates specifically to things like private equity, we're neutral player there. Private equity is neither inherently good or bad from my experience. I've
Yeah,
worked in the area for a while. It does bring capital, it brings discipline, it brings growth expectations. But I think for an industry, and what American Work is trying to help do is just make sure that we have the alignment. I think if the capital is paired with strong industry knowledge and strong leaders, I think the outcome is going to be positive. I think it can accelerate progress and professionalization of our industry. So I think there's some positives there. Our role, I think, on that particular side is just to ensure that consolidation, doesn't reduce any of the opportunity across our industry or our businesses. So
yeah,
that's one thing we sort of try to keep an eye on. I think the merger activity, I think the consolidation of our industry, sort of inevitable for industry our size. Part of that can be healthy. And so, again, we're sort of neutral. We want to, I, I believe, and I think we believe as an association that strong leadership is what's going to carry us through, whether it's industry consolidation, whether it's outside money, whether it's generational transfer. And so we're really trying to focus on helping organizations grow strong leaders who can navigate and facilitate that change. And in other industries, that's what's worked, and I think it will work in ours as well.
yeah, for sure. And I want to talk about that strong leaders part in a second, because that's really something that I think is going to, drive the future of this industry. Before I get to that, though, I do want to circle back to Matt for a second. Um, it's this obviously being a midterm year, no doubt you're going to have your hands full navigating through what's going to happen between now and November. So, what are you looking at this year in terms of what is some of the key areas of focus that could potentially have long term effects on where this industry is headed?
You hear about this from everybody. It's always about labor, cost of labor. We had a nice win with DOL, with the IFR, the interim final rule, which got rid of the AWAR, changes the way it's working.
Sure.
That's not permanent, which is why we've been talking about a bill that GT Thompson, who is Mr. Glenn Thompson from Pennsylvania, is the chair of the House Ag Committee, has a bill that would codify and make that permanent. As we've seen under any administration, the next Secretary of Labor or DHS can change the rules and regs in the next administration. It's kind of why we haven't seen anything in 40 years since 1986. Also on that H2A side, I heard recently, it used to be 20 to 30 pages of paper that you would have for the H2A rule. It's like 4 to 8,000 now. Like, it's
Yeah.
simplifying that. one of the wins we got this year from DHS is you don't have to do stuff by paper anymore. You can do it all electronic. It's a one-stop shop. So
Mhm.
one of the biggest things that I've seen, and you and I talked about this, I've been in DC over 20 years, in policy and politics for over 25, is just getting departments to talk to one another. Like
Yeah.
USDA knows the problems because they hear from the farmers and the growers and the ranchers and the producer and agribusiness, which doesn't work, but getting them to work with DOL. So yeah, I think there's a real opportunity there. With GT's bill, it's a bipartisan bill. This week, the Farm Bill is getting marked up in the House Ag Committee. So after that, we hope to see that. What we're trying to explain to people is that this needs to happen. There needs to be some type of change, especially on the ag labor
Yeah.
side. There's a real opportunity. I think if you've seen, we and some others, especially from the Specialty Crop Farm Bureau Alliance, have been pushing for economic assistance for all of our members. Doesn't matter, we had the mass payments, which came out earlier last year.
Sure.
We're able to apply for that. You had Senator Thune, who is the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, or sorry, Senator Thune, who's the majority leader in the Senate, working with Senator Bozeman, who's the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, have come up with a package for all of agriculture. Now you've had the freeze in Florida. There's a drought in California. We got to figure out how to get that and to get this economic assistance out for all of ag, but specifically for horticulture and specialty crops here in the next couple months. The biggest problem is finding that vehicle. And starting today, as you know, are the primaries in Texas. So
Right.
we've already started this primary season, and a lot of things I don't want to say come to halt, but they slow down, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All we're going to see is some CRs and some bills, but specifically on the farm bill and labor here, there might be some opportunities. As you mentioned, November, just for everyone to understand, we've already had 32 members of the House either retire or decide they're not running. So
Mhm.
at Cultivate and at the fly-in and whenever I talk with folks, it's like, we got to go educate our elected officials. Well, we're just about to lose another group. So we're going to have
Yep.
to restart that. I know I'm beating the drum here, but it's our election cycle. It's what we had. We can't, it's not going to change unless there's some major political changes or rules and laws, but it's the deck we're dealt with. We got to deal with it and we got to figure out how to get there to say that. But I would say something here on the labor and farm bill, and just as we mentioned earlier, that whole supply chain. So there's a lot of little wins. We signed a letter with over like 100 different groups, talking about the farm bill and talking about these things. So it's really great to see all of agriculture now working together on the same things. Yeah, everyone's got their little, pieces here they want, but ag in general is really moving forward together as one unit and educating those folks. I think I've mentioned to you this before, like there's 435 seats in the House, and you need 218 to pass it off the floor. Well, about 40 seats represent 90% of agriculture in the House. Every senator has some type of ag or horticulture. Absolutely. They always have it. But in the House, it's a different story. It's a different conversation. So depending on which meeting you're going into, those issues we talked about, we have to change our talking points.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and to your point there too, I've been on the media side of the specialty ag industry for quite a while, and I used to see so many different organizations. It almost looked like they were working in silos. I mean, they're working on a lot of the same things, but everybody would, one group would go to DC this week, and then later on another one would go. It seems like you're having more of those, joint conversations together because, as you said, there are going to be obviously specific issues that are relative to those specific industries, but so much of what you're fighting for is our commonality. So the fact that you can come together, and I think too, just having had a spouse who once worked on Capitol Hill, I feel for what you're doing, Matt, at times like this because there's so many issues that you want to fight for, knowing that that they're starting to hit the campaign trail now, and just trying to catch you people at the right time is, you know, this is an important time for you, but they've got, their own priorities that they're working on. So, um,
Right. I think that's what you guys are discussing. What Matt's described here is really how our advocacy has evolved
Yeah.
by design. I mean, policy uncertainty is now it's a permanent feature in the operating environment in which we live, work, and play. So our job is to try to reduce that risk. And as you said, I mean, Matt's done a great job. And we've always had good coalition partners, but we've expanded that substantially because that safety in numbers is how DC works. I mean, we're much more proactive and less reactive than we used to be. And I think the thing that's really been helpful really in the past couple of years, we've always done it, but I think we've upped our game a bit, is really trying to get our grassroots members involved. trying to make sure that we have a greater participation from our industry, preparing our members earlier for these regulatory shifts so they can be involved with it. And I think our teams have done a really nice job with that to try to get our people involved. It's important, and that's what it's going to take for the future. Is the uncertainty is not going to get much better. We have to
Yeah.
keep every week figuring out what's next.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
As we start to wind the conversation down a little bit, one of the things that I do want to go back to is again the next generation of the industry. And and there's certain initiatives that I try and speak very highly of when I'm talking to others in the industry. One of those being the Horticulture Research Institute Leadership Academy. And I know we don't have somebody specifically from HRI on the call here, but that's such an important vehicle for not just recognizing who the next generation of industry leaders are, but putting them together, building the tools that they can use to become, the future industry leaders. And I know we just recently closed the window of applications for this coming year, but you hear about so many success stories coming out of that particular initiative. Any thoughts on kind of how that is continuing to evolve?
Absolutely. It's certainly part of the generational transfer story that we have, but we we're pretty dialed into the fact that the next generation of industry leaders is really going to have to be as strong on the finance, the strategy, the leadership side as they are on the plant science and growing great plants. And so I think the HRI Leadership Academy is certainly an important part of that equation. We're completing our fourth class. We're interviewing for our fifth class now.
Sure.
What we're trying to do is develop high potential leaders. I say we've got so much talent hiding in plain sight across our industry. The next generation is so capable. They just need support. They're smart. They're entrepreneurial. I mean, they got this. They just need some support and some development. And the Leadership Academy helps them with their business acumen, with their strategy, and we have a whole session in DC on public policy so that they have that as well.
Sure.
Brian, you touched on it. What we really one of the biggest values of this though is the cross industry segment network that this program builds.
Yeah.
Intentionally, each class or cohort is built with you know diversity of industry segment, diversity of geography, as much as we can get, so that this is a true, strong class that networks. And we are focused on that long-term leadership capability. And I think it's working. I think if you look back to the first class and the second class, they are strong.
Yeah.
And they are helping that next generation. So that's an important part. I think you also know you spoke about the financial literacy that we're rolling out. We also have micro credentialing with HortCred, which is kind of an on ramp to our certification. We believe there's this whole kind of pyramid of education and knowledge that needs to be out there that helps build the leaders and gives them tools. So those are all the things that we're doing to really try to make sure that, as I said earlier, the succession of our industry, the evolution of our industry, and I think one of the things American Heart really needs to do is make sure that our industry has the leaders, the data-driven capabilities, the advocacy tools, the marketing tools, all the education needed for the next generation of leaders to take our industry to where it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
One last question, and I'll throw this out to each of you to answer in your own way. So, kind of taking a step back from everything that we've talked about to this point, what excites each of you the most about the future of where this industry is headed? And I'll start with you, Matt, to get your thoughts on that.
Brian, I'll go with a couple of things you brought up. It's the next generation. It's the third, fourth, or fifth, or even someone who's brand new. The excitement from people that I meet either at the fly-in or they come to DC or the Leadership Academy or Cultivate. One, they asked me just because of my department, how do I get engaged? How do I do that? And it's just great to see that. And we explained all the things we have, as you mentioned, Leadership Academy or connectors or all the different programs around if it's on education or, get involved and have your elected official. But I think the thing that I see the best in where this is going is how excited people are, the new folks that are coming in and that next generation. Cause I think Ken kind of mentioned it. We do kind of see a passing of I don't want to say the old guard, but a previous guard to a new guard with a lot of people that are retiring or stepping down or handing it down to their son or daughter or, nieces and nephews. So there's a there's an opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, but if we could educate and give the tools to our members and also to the industry, it's going to go a long way. But as Ken mentioned, being prepared and being proactive and not reactive in all these different areas is going to be super beneficial, not only to American Hort and our members, but the horticulture industry as a whole.
Sure, absolutely. Mary Beth, what about you?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything Matt said. I think seeing the engagement from the up and coming generations is excellent. And, we have more and more people asking how to get involved with things at American Port, and that's really rewarding and fulfilling to see. But along with that, what really excites me is just, the new technologies and the adaptation of technologies by our industry, whether it is AI or it's automation or it's robotics or whatever that is. I think the future landscapes got a lot of potential and then just going to look really different. And I think this up and coming generation is going to work with those in place now to create better operations, more efficiency, and just a stronger industry overall. So
Sure.
I look forward to seeing that unfold.
Okay, awesome. And then Ken, what excites you about the future of the industry?
Brian, what excites me about the future of the industry from our perch at American Horde, there's just so many good things going on, but the industry is becoming more sophisticated. I mean, there's better genetics. We've always had good genetics, but better genetics. The brands, I think, are getting stronger, and that's important from a consumer's perspective. Smarter use of data, I think, is going to help us grow. And I'll tap one more time on the strong leadership pipeline. I think that's very exciting. I mean, the green industry has always been resilient. I think what's different now is just the level of sophistication that's required to win. It's not just great plants; it's also great business. And American Hort's role is really to ensure that our members are not just surviving the changes that are going on, but are really leading it. And proud of our team for doing that, and excited for the industry. I think there's great things ahead.
Thank you for joining us. You can learn more about this and other topics at greenhousegrower.com, and you can also follow Greenhouse Grower on LinkedIn. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and please leave us a rating or review as it helps other listeners find the show. The Greenhouse Grower to Grower podcast is produced by the team at Meister Media Worldwide. I'm Brian Sparks, editor of Greenhouse Grower.